Hi everyone. Yeah, so as Ash just said, we're here to talk about esports data. So I'm joined by Mark, Flavien, Mario, and Oskar, who are all doing many wonderful things in the esports data space. They're in all bar Mark's case, CEO of their respective companies, and Mark heads up esports at Sport Radar. So we've got a great panel here, and I think the first thing that I'd like to say, just to give kind of a bit of context to anyone in the room that isn't aware, is just around the landscape of esports data. It's important to, when looking at esports data and esports generally, is that different games are kind of different sports within themselves if you compare to the traditional context, both in terms of how fans view them and also in terms of how data is acquired. And really these are split into kind of more open circuit games, such as Counter-Strike, where data deals are done with tournament operators. There's very open API access and so forth, and far more closed systems, things like Overwatch and League of Legends. And that really has a key impact on how data is transformed and how it works within the industry. So is that right? Would you agree with that? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Agree with.
That really data is kind of split into more open and closed circuits, and that different games have different challenges in regards to acquiring data and how you transform it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some games like Dota 2, for example, provide like pretty open solutions to gathering data, both, I mean, live with a certain delay and particularly for good data for post-match, while other games are, like the Blizzard games, like you mentioned, Overwatch, really don't have any great channels whatsoever to access like the real good data, which is server-side data.
I mean, so Mario, just to kind of give a more general summary to everyone in the audience, like how robust and reliable is esports data generally?
Of course, it really depends on what you're using it for. I can obviously explain from our perspective of betting, and I would say right now it's much more reliable than it was, for sure. And it's, as I said, it's important to follow and to gather enough data, obviously, to comply odds for what he mentioned, both pre-match and post-game. But in-play is one of the most dynamic factors of the game itself, of betting, meaning that providing stats during the game is interesting for people that view it, and then accurate data transmitted into odds provides better or more interesting markets for the bettors that are willing to play there. I would say there's still a long way to go in order for it to be as any other traditional sport, as you mentioned, to look at it as you open a certain whatever portal or API and it's just everything's there. Right now, I mean, Oskar knows better maybe than other risks because they are actually more specialized in gathering the data. And I really wanted in few years, even if bigger gaming providers are against betting, at least this data is not just for betting. That's what I want to say, and I hope in the next years we'll see some improvement towards opening up. And Blizzard is just one example. You see in the new titles, they don't think in that direction too, even though they mention themselves as esports titles.
Sure. Flavien, would you expect to see more of the closed operators opening up over the coming years? I mean, especially whilst Mario comments that data isn't just used for betting, obviously that's typically where the money comes from to pay for the other services. Do you think that especially with the changes in regulation in the US, that a few of these companies over there might be more inclined to share access in future?
Yeah, it's going in that direction. Like you're looking at PUBG, for example. They're really going forward by giving access to their own API, even live. But I think the problem is at some point when you're a game developer or publisher, you're owning only your data, so it's not a complete offer for bookmakers. So even if all game developers were sharing their data, it would be a hard job to go after every one of them. And also there's a lot of competition that are not organized or on the web server of the different game developers. So in a way, this shouldn't be the solution. And providing data, as probably all of us understand very well, it's more than just giving access to some servers. There is a lot of thought about how to provide the data, what kind of standard do we have, what kind of latencies, even the loads. There is a huge amount of data, and you have to give access very quickly to a huge amount of data. So it's a lot of work, and I think we are focusing on this, and game developers are focusing on building great games. So I think we can help them, though. That's very, very likely outcome in the future.
Do you find that there's a big difference between pre-match and post-match data and live data?
Yeah, there is a huge difference. Like pre-match is trivial. Like it's manual job, basically. What's the schedule? If the schedule is changing, you have to chat with the tournament organizers. Post-match is often available through APIs. It's usually pretty badly done by the game developers, depending on the games, but sometimes it's well done. Live is one of the biggest challenge, I think, because the game developers don't offer anything, so you have to find a new way. At PandaScore, we're using AI to leverage videos to have live data. That allows us to have feed on Overwatch, feed on League of Legends, feed on Hearthstone, games that are very protective around their live data. But in the end, this is the only way of having data is watching games or having access to some servers or some specific games and some specific competitions, but it's very limited in the end, so it's not satisfying. So to conclude, every game is different, every competition is different, and of course live at the moment is one of the biggest challenge, and that kind of slow down the overall potential of esports betting in the end.
Can I make an additional comment around the closed?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think that an important thing to mention here, I mean, as we're talking about the live data and like some game developers such as Blizzard not allowing any data access, I think like such as ourselves and others here, I mean, it's a matter of education to the game developers, because a company like Blizzard, I have a hard time seeing that they're going to open up their data for betting anytime soon. However, if you look at, I mean, our company, for instance, Abios, I mean, only a certain amount of our customer base do betting. I mean, we provide a lot of data to like media companies, news sites, teams, and if we could educate, you know, companies like Blizzard or the game developers in a better way and tell them that like we can segregate the data that we provide to people. So if you give us like access to your servers, for example, or to good APIs, I mean, we could commit to providing this data only to non-betting related companies. And I think that's very possible, but I think some of the game developers, I mean, for the foreseeable future at least, such as Blizzard, who like create more children's games, or you know, games adapted for children, I mean, they'll probably like to stay away with their open feeds from the betting industry, unfortunately. So then we'll have to find, you know, other ways of doing the live stuff for betting.
So Mark, you obviously have a pretty significant data deal at Sportradar with ESL. Can you tell people what the advantage of having those kind of exclusive data partnerships are, and how that benefits your clients, and what the kind of impacts of those are?
Yeah, so in the traditional sports space, generally our partners just provide us with data and we sort of sell it to the industry. But with ESL, it's very two-way. We help them and they help us, and we kind of grow together. Because in terms of us handling the data, it's just as hard for the tournament organizer to have up-to-date data, live data, post-match stats, visualizations on the broadcast, things like that. And that's actually quite challenging in some of these new game titles, especially to have the right data to make the stories happen live on broadcast. And this is where we kind of want to build something long-term together to be able to handle this data, to be able to add new game titles, to be able to speak to the publishers to say, you know, like these guys have said, this is valuable stuff. And if you think about Valve had the vision 7 years ago to build their game on top of an API system, and just about everyone else, they don't know how to handle it. And this is where we can really work together to say, you know, everyone wants this data, and we want these live betting experiences. We want to have a bet in our favorite game, and all these new games are going to be coming out. And I feel like now everybody's starting to realize that we can actually leverage some of this data and you know, really work together to find ways to utilize it better than we have in the past. Like Mario said, a couple of years ago it was very dodgy, let's say.
So would you all agree that it's more important about what you do with the data rather than how you're acquiring it, and that you're kind of maybe what's not in parity, it's quite similar as to how you're all getting the data and what you have access to? Maybe starting with you, Oskar.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't agree with that. I think that finding the right source of data and making sure you have the right data is the most important part. And then, I mean, how you distribute it is, I mean, depends on the client, right? So we all distribute data in somewhat different ways. Like Flavien and I we are data distributors, while Mario and Mark, provide betting solutions, odds, white labels. So, but the most important part, I think, for all of us is how we gather, how we collect the data, and in what way we can get the best possible data, the fastest data, and especially how to get data right from the source, from the fastest possible feed.
Would you all agree? Mario?
I will agree to the part where it's really important for what you process it. As he said, they're more like distributors of the data itself as data, rather than, let's say, the panels before that, they can process the data to make some notifications about the game itself. We use it to make better markets. Someone else might use it for, I don't know, just forecasting the future. And as I said, for me, it's important to the part where you process and what you use that data for, I mean, from our perspective.
Okay. And I think also it's all about potential. I mean, the best data, the fastest one, the most reliable one, allow to build the best product in the end. And if the data is a limitant, I mean, that's why we're working all on this direction, is we need to have the best data possible, because data shouldn't be the limitant. Everyone should be able to build a live in-play experience for Panthers, and that requires great live data. So I think that's why it's important to choose the right partners, but that's also important for companies like ours to always strive to have better data.
So Mark, I mean, in terms of live data, so quite often these APIs are delayed, or in terms of AI practices, you're working off kind of delayed Twitch feeds. Is that a big risk for operators? How can you mitigate against that? I mean, obviously in more traditional sports, you might have scouts in stadiums. Is this something we're seeing here? Is it a problem? Is there a court-siding risk? Is there not?
It's extremely risky, and a lot of the time there's really not much you can do. If most games, particularly the big three, CS, Dota, and League of Legends, they're just far too complicated to have any kind of manual, you're sitting down in a stadium, putting numbers in an app. There's too many things going on at once. You could never keep up. So it has to be automated. It has to be technical. That doesn't necessarily mean every game. Some games are simpler than others. Fighting games, Rocket League.
CS:GO.
CS:GO is simpler, definitely. So I think in the future we might see more branching out and potential of actual manual scouts in stadiums, potentially, for bigger events especially. But most of the time, you have to leverage relationships and partnerships. It's very important to be sort of open about the source and just kind of say, for some competitions, you'll have different levels of data based on, what the game is, but who the tournament organizer is, what your partnerships are. And it's important to be open and honest about the source and what you can do, what you can't do. Because it is, particularly for some games like Counter-Strike, very fragmented. And people go all over the place, all over the world. Different sort of companies have relationships, all over the place, and there is no one solution to this. It's just there's too much. And as we add more game titles and more complexity to it, it's only going to get more interesting. Put it that way.
So there may be a few tournament operators in this room. So Flavien, do you think that TOs should be looking to do exclusive data deals, or do you think that a non-exclusive way is the way to go? I mean, from their standpoint.
It's a tough topic. We have example in sports where there is mega exclusivity deal with some companies, and the problem with that is it's too expensive for most of the bookmakers. So they use slower feeds just to be able to work. But in the end, of course, if you have the mega exclusive deal, you have the fastest data. So it's tough because exclusivity costs a lot of money. So in a way, it's a good thing. But I mean, our approach is more global. We try to cover every competition with the same data standard from the video. But of course, sometimes we are slower than others. So
Most times, I guess.
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, when you look at the markets, sometimes we're way faster. But it's because of the manual processing and humans are very, very slow. But I
So
think
Mario, what are you doing when you don't have the API access for games then in terms of real-time processing?
Well, first of all, we try not to have any sort of advantage.
But if we look at something like
Yeah.
Overwatch or League where it's closed,
Well, that means that no one else has it, right? In a way, I'm saying in a situation where, let's say, another provider is known to have that exclusivity, and it's obvious that their prices will be faster than everybody else in the world. Maybe just not do it or just follow their odds. What else can you do? Like that's the term where exclusivity breaks, right? It's exclusive that you adopt it, but everybody's free to scrape it and to have a guy there copying it right away, right? We've seen this happening with us. We've done it obviously with others in the past. Like it was a learning curve in esports for all the companies, and as you know, we've been one of the first, almost 5 years there, and everything changed. I would say in a pretty good way. So either not offer it if you're not confident in your price, or find a way, figure it out.
that makes sense. So over to Mark, I'd say. So what would you say the main challenges are for bookmakers, just more generally looking to get seriously involved in offering esports markets? Is this a data question or is it a wider thing?
I think it depends on who the bookmaker is. Some do have esports expertise in-house, and that's where you can have a frank conversation about the limitations of esports. And it's funny because in the beginning, most people had this leap in logic where you go, well, every game is digital, so you just take the data and sell it, no problem. But obviously, it's completely the opposite. And each bookmaker is different depending on what expertise they have. And it's the same with our products. Across the board, you have to have a range of ability in terms of who the end up bookmaker, what they can and can't do, will determine what kind of conversation you can have. Because trying to explain Dota or League of Legends to someone who's never played games before is pointless, honestly. But like I said, it's also back to the point of just clarity in terms of what products you have and what you can and can't do. And most people who are in the esports space understand this based on different streams. Even the same competition might be streamed slightly faster in China than it is on Twitch. Some players take longer to encode video than others, and and this is where, like you're saying, with the closed environments, it actually creates an even playing field in that anything that is public, everyone gets the same access. So there's no, like Counter-Strike where there's up and down who has what. We all know that everyone's got whatever's public, and it's up to the skill and the ability of the technical solutions to provide whatever products you have for Overwatch and League of Legends, for example. Is there anything that you'd add to that, Mario?
Well, I agree with pretty much everything he said. If you look at we know that for now the 3 top titles are what your main focus is and where your competition focus is. So it's pretty much huge focus on them. And I would say in the last year or two, no one expands into actually covering any of the new titles. There is a hype around new titles, but there won't be a new football or new tennis. Like these titles are here to stay, and the more we expand their offering, the more experience we gather into what you said, and this helps with the years coming from offering a match winner to now having 30, 40 plus markets on in-play. That's a long way, which came with a learning curve.
So as Mario just mentioned, obviously there's no real change to a football, but there are changes in esports games. So obviously being digital products, they can change very rapidly, and those changes can sometimes be kind of very much game changing. So Flavien, does that really have a major impact, a minor impact? How do you mitigate against these quite significant changes sometimes in games?
It has an impact, that's for sure. When you're modeling a game, when you're trying to predict outcomes, the parameters can be changed, but it doesn't mean it will change everything on the model. The parameters are evolving from patch to patch. So in a way, it's an impact. It has an impact. It's not a huge impact. It's not like it doesn't destroy all your work. One of the issues is the history of the data is losing value. The more changes there is, the less like a year ago data is worthwhile. That's one of the aspects. But I think it's not so big of an impact. It can be overcome. And same goes for the interface of the game. The interface changes a lot. Sometimes some data are visible, and a few patch later, the data is missing. That has a bigger impact, because if you're losing, for example, in League of Legends, at some point they showed the type of drakes, and then they shut it down, and then they put it back again. This is quite a big problem if you want to price which is going to be the next drake, for example. So that's probably the major impact, but I think also the game developers are kind of finding their sweet spot with the interface, and if they find it, they won't change it that much, so the data will be more consistent. It's taking some time. For example, on PUBG, it's kind of messy, it's changing a lot. Overwatch is the same, it changed a lot at the beginning. They're getting there, they're getting stable more and more, and this is, I mean, very positive for everyone.
So I'd just like to say, if anyone does want to ask any questions, you can do so through the Slido app, and I'll put them to the panelists. But Oskar, so you're a company that don't provide betting odds themselves, but are there products that you're providing that can help stimulate punter interest in betting markets, either through bookmakers or through publishers and other kind of companies that you're dealing with?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we're not supplying the people, like betting companies, with the data they need to calculate odds or to create the fixtures or whatnot, I mean, we have a lot of clients who just use our data to create content and create interest and knowledge around the teams that are playing. So it can be statistics around head-to-head meetings between two teams, like how has this team been performing the last month, or how do these two teams usually play against each other, or if this player picks this hero, what's the win percentage, or these kind of statistics are, I think, very interesting for the consumers. I think if they're able to get all this data, all this statistics, all this information, then that'll enable them to make more bets, and even make bets on matches where they might not be inherently knowledgeable from the get-go.
What about you, Mario?
I just wanted to mention about data changes. Something else changes a lot too, which is for betting mostly than for data, and that's the transfers and the players moving from team to team. Yeah, that is a very key point in all of the odds provision, because let's say you get Kingwin 2 years ago, and then you get it after they change all your roster, and that's no longer Kingwin, right? So you should look at you should create a network of players and rank each one individually, just not to make your major point, but to help you know when they're moving, like Godsend and Fnatic switch teams, that kind of thing also breaks a lot. And if you don't follow it well enough and you're not fully hands-on on that, that's also a big change in the game, apart from mechanics.
Yeah. Is that something that you're sending through to your clients in terms of data, so that they can understand this? If you're providing data more than just an odds feed, if your clients are doing it themselves, I mean, that may be more appropriate for Flavien and for Oskar.
I mean, I could go first. I mean, we always leave recommendations to all of our clients. Some clients are already very knowledgeable about esports, but for some of them it's important to educate them. And we inform all of our clients that they need to base, if they do modeling on our data or whatever they do, they always need to look at the rosters, which 5 players are playing which 5 players. You can pretty much disregard under what brand, what team name or what team logo they're playing, right?
Exactly.
It's which 5 players are playing against which 5 players. That's all of the importance, because essentially in most of the games, you're playing 5 versus 5. So if one player changes, 20% of the lineup has changed, and the whole dynamics of the whole team and everything, how they work, how they collaborate, everything changes. Whereas in football, if you just change one defender, the team might be playing pretty much the same. But this all ties into how, the previous discussion that we had around, the updates in esports. That the game isn't the same. There are patches. There are new heroes added. Items are changed. There are new weapons. Things can happen. You need to, in Dota 2, for example, every Thursday, every second Thursday, we're always ready to update our API or how we handle the data, because that's when Valve release changes to Dota 2. And I think that's like very, very important to keep in mind when you're doing modeling, betting, statistics models, whatever you're doing, is that you have to constantly keep updating everything because the games change. And same with the rosters. I mean, you have to update for the rosters so the players playing. You just have to be on your toes. You cannot expect in esports to build something that's going to work for even like half a year or a year, You need to stay on your toes and stay up to date and update everything that you do.
And as you might understand, esports data is complicated. Like, there is a lot of different things, and I think that's our job to the panelists to simplify this for every kind of business. Because when you think about all the changes and you think about all the complexity for every esports, like the complexity is real, and in the end, it's just statistics. So we also need to educate our customers, bookmakers, media, whatever, about how to leverage the data, what can you build with our data, what kind of use cases works, what are all the limitations. But I think we spend a lot of time, and I think you also spend a lot of time to explaining what kind of use case, what can you build with our data. And we handle the risk, we handle the problems. The patch is on our back. The roster change is on our back. We have people verifying all the roster change all the time. So we do the hard job, and now what can you build with that?
What are the most interesting things that you're seeing your clients or other clients building with this data, or what do you think that might look like going forwards? We're
focusing on live, so most of the customers are building live experience. We're working with big company doing streaming, and the experience is on how to interact with the video feeds and with some kind of a trivia. So they have some questions and they pop up and you can answer the question, you earn points, and in the end you have a ranking system. And all of this is live, so it's contextually linked to what's happening in the game. So for example, if one player is killing another, the question is going to be related to this kill and not to just whatever. So this is one of the very contextual live use cases that is, I think, very interesting for the audience to engage very, very easily.
Great, so I have a question from the floor. So one for Mark, possibly. So how does the data that you receive work with in regards to integrity? Are you able to use the data that you get back from your bookmaker partners and from the game servers and so forth to combat match fixing?
There's one actually really interesting element of esports in general is the fact that just about everything is always recorded to online, and particularly for some of the bigger games, you get actual replays, so you can go into the game and look at player perspectives, and that's something that doesn't exist in sport. And you can get into real detail of where they clicked on the screen, what decisions they made in the moment, and that can actually be used to analyze how the match went and the decisions they were making on the fly. And you can tell the difference between someone who's trying to win and clearly trying to avoid winning. So that has actually happened, over the years, and it's an unfortunate part of the industry as we grew up, especially some of the more famous cases. But this is something we can do with our partnerships, and particularly on the betting side. They obviously don't, none of our clients want to be involved in any of this as well. So they, really sort of we can work together to put the pieces into place to sort of tell these stories to make sure that this isn't profitable. So yeah, integrity is a big part of what we do. It's a big part of what I've done over the years as well. So that is a very unique esports thing that we can't do in our normal sports integrity fields, because usually it's just a camera from a stance and that's it. That's the only viewpoint you get.
As a more general point, so Mario, do you see match fixing as being a major threat to esports? Is that a big red flag for operators coming in, or is it a more minor issue?
For me, this question has been asked in every panel I've been. I understand how to say that in someone's eyes, this may look very easy. And in many of the conversations I speak with people that still don't understand, they think, it's a boy that stays in his room and then wins $1 million while playing CSGO. Like, this is the perspective I see from people that are not educated. So for them, it looks very easy for this boy to throw a match, right? I would say in the beginning, there were obvious cases very badly executed. There were others that were attempted to be more covered, still got caught. And right now, it just the industry grew so much that if you take the largest operator that would take your whatever bet, even if it's £10,000, you're still not gonna make from what you're gonna make if you win the tournament or be a professional player for 10 years, you know? So it kind of became for them too risky to do such a stupid thing in the top, let's say, 30, 50 teams. And in the closed leagues, it's very hard. Like in League of Legends, in Blizzard games, no. Dota and CSGO is where the possibility is open. You know, all the smaller Asian tournaments, smaller CIS in the past. But right now, they just grew to become bigger, and it just would very rarely risk it for something like that because there is no profit at the end.
Do any of you think that there are any concerns that bookmakers should have when just entering esports generally or when choosing a data partner?
Regarding integrity, we should really praise the effort from ESL, from Riot Games, from Blizzard, from all the major competition to educate the players. They're putting a lot of effort on this, and I think this is how we can grow also. I mean, they're earning a large amount of money now, the professional esports players, so this is obviously one way to kind of protect themselves from match fixing and so on, but the education is kind of the next step, and it works pretty well. Like there is some good initiatives made by those people.
Yeah, I think coming back to your question of what people should think about when choosing like their data provider, odds provider, you know, whatever it might be, I think it's pretty important. I mean, there's basically 2 points I want to make here that I always try to tell and educate people, our clients that we talk to. And one is that it's always good to like test different products. This is like if you want data, test our product, test other products, and then see for yourself which one is best. But the other part is that you probably want to go with somebody like reliable who's been around for a while. I mean, Mario, we both been around for many, many years in the industry. And there tends in esports, since it's very like startup focused, there's a lot of startups.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of companies that come and go pretty quickly and have come and gone over the years, and some make more noise than others, and everybody promises everything, that they'll do everything within data and everything within odds.
Vulcan, very good example. You remember Vulcan?
Yeah, the $12 million financed by Sequoia. Yeah, I mean, they were around for 1 year. I mean, there's a lot of companies that come up, make a lot of noise, do a lot of interviews, say that they're going to do everything within data, and 1 year later they're just gone. And then, I mean, if you built your sportsbook on that data provider, then, I mean, you're going to have to basically redo everything. So I think one is compare the different feeds. Don't just test one feed and go with that one. That's one advice. My second advice is like go with somebody that actually has a big customer base that's been around for a long time, that knows what they're doing. And I mean, yeah, those are my two best advice for new actors entering the scene.
Does anyone else have any advice that they'd like to give?
Finding some people in the company that knows very well esports is also very interesting to kind of educate within the company and also have a nice conversation with data partners or with white label partners. I mean, it's always better to have insights on how the game behaves and the specificities. I think it's a very basic tip, but I think it was fun.
Yeah. So I have another question from the floor, which we touched on earlier around kind of the closed game dev. So your Blizzards and your Riots doing Overwatch and League of Legends and so forth, asking kind of if they will embrace esports data more fully and offer the data for betting. But I'd like to kind of switch that up a little bit and say, what would the impact of that be, Mark? Like if these publishers did do that, would there be a significant change for betting operators?
I think so, definitely, particularly League of Legends. I mean, they obviously know that the industry is growing, you know, and we're all here, you know, I don't think we're invisible. I think they know how big esports betting is going, particularly with the US. Most of these companies, by the way, are all US focused. So traditionally they were very scared about talking about betting in any context because of the legal situation. And now that's changed. You know, I think there's plenty of conversations that can happen, and I think it'll have a massive impact, because I think one of the reasons why the big three exist now is because there are no real good solutions for any new games, so Overwatch and things like that. I think there are many potential titles that are completely closed, and some developers have absolutely no data mechanisms at all. Blizzard obviously build APIs already for many of their games, so I feel like it's not a massive leap for them, but it's like a more of a distribution and who gets access and things like that. So I feel like this will change eventually, because it is, like I said, very valuable information, and it's an untapped revenue stream for some of them. And the Valve games are as popular as they are, I feel like, because the data is available. And you can build many things from them, great products and websites and Dota Buff and all the rest of it that, create these interactions and stories with the games and that you play and the games that the pros play, and you can compare the two and all this kind of thing. So, I think it will change. It's just going to take some time, and it'll have a pretty big impact, particularly on what we do when that happens. Because it depends on how they do it. If they do it openly, like Dota API, or if they do it on a partnership basis, and only certain people get access to it, then that'll change the game pretty massively, I think.
How would you see that changing the game if only certain people get access?
Well, it would be a really massive challenge for anyone else, because say right now, for example, with Overwatch, if everyone's operating on the same playing field, if one group gets a partnership and they get exclusive access, then it creates this issue where everyone else is always behind, depending on how they implement it, obviously. And unless it's all the same, like most sport on television, there's very little delay to be worried about. It's all kind of broadcast pretty quickly. So, but with any kind of online broadcasts, the latency is a big issue. So like I said, it depends on what they go with and how they handle it. But I think we'd all favour something a bit more open, to be honest, rather than trying to do a deal like exclusivity.
Yeah.
So just to go around them, so starting with Oskar and going down the line, what do you think the most exciting future development in data is?
Well, that's a hard one without disclosing too much of what we're currently building. No, I think that the most exciting part with data, like in general, is just like improving the availability, as we've been talking about, and the accessibility, and just building new kinds of products on the data. I think it's both the betting part, like you guys are very focused on, but it's also the content part. I mean, I think there's right now in esports data, most of the focus has been towards the betting industry because that's where the money's at. Like betting companies have a pretty clear path to revenue, like how you're going to earn money, whereas the media companies or the team pages or whatever it might be, a lot of these companies have a challenging time finding profitability right now. But I think that with the help from really good data and the right data providers, I think they're going to be able to provide some like really exciting, non-betting esports data-oriented products. I think that's probably the most exciting part of the future, I think.
Well, for us, those things are very correlated. The more they improve, the more ground will be for us to improve as well. And our improvement's pretty straightforward. Either better markets or more of them, more titles. There's nothing to reinvent there. We, as I said, started off with basic markets. Now we have more like the other sports, like player-oriented, like some exotic, like number of headshots, total time, and stuff like that. So the more data we get here, the more we can process it. That's it.
Simple. I think also there is the more exposure to companies in the esports industry as a whole, the more exposure they have with data, the more they can build better experience for the customers, for the viewers, for the fans, for the punters. I think we've seen the customers we had 2 years ago, and we see the customers we have now, and the potential they're creating for their own customers is just way, way, way bigger. So, they're more educated about how to use data, and they're creating great experience now. So, fantasy, live experience, like live betting, it's getting very interesting now.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the new untapped games we haven't seen yet. The games that have not been released yet, and potential sort of challenges to the market. Obviously, in the last few years, we've seen Fortnite come out of absolutely nowhere and change the landscape in terms of streaming. Will it have an impact in esports in the end? Who knows? But every single year, there's a new game that comes out that has that kind of potential to say, is it as exciting? Is it better? Are people going to play it? Do we look into it? And like some of the guys were saying before, if you do something now that takes 6 months, it's already too late. It's something that people might have moved on, and this will continue indefinitely. I don't think there's many games that will last forever, like the way the sport does, where football's going to be football forever. Basketball's not going to change very much. But I feel like the gaming industry always changes and evolves, and there'll be new challenges, new data sets to process, new things to think about. To me, that's one of the most exciting things as a provider, and in the betting space as well.
And just to completely answer, I think Battle Royale is a very, very nice example, and it's even more than esport. Like, it's esportainment, and the way it's consumed by viewers, it's a different way. It's not like the competition we used to. It's like it's a very different way, and that's very, very exciting for esports as a whole. Yeah.
Great, and thanks everyone, and thanks to UltraPlay for sponsoring the session again. So we'll wrap it up there.